Hi, everybody. It's Jay, and I am back in the booth with you for another sneak peek video preview for this week's new release here on Say with Jay. Our new release this week is episode 2 of For Keeps with You. It's the 5th book in Jessie Gussman's Baxter Boys Sweet Romance series, and I'll have a preview of episode 2 and a little bit more about the story in just a bit. But first, Jessie and I had been brainstorming, trying to come up with some fun things we could do during these previews. And one thing that we realized that we've done before but haven't done in quite a while was to give you guys a chance to know me a little bit better. So we thought we would do a Q&A session for you here today. So a couple of weeks ago, or a week-ish, Jessie asked the members of her Facebook reader chat group to submit some questions, and boy, did you guys. And I'm going to take a few of those here and answer them for you today. Now, for what it's worth, if you subscribe to Jessie's newsletter, and if you don't, why don't you? If you want to, you can subscribe to her newsletter right here. But I actually have answered more of those questions there. So if you do subscribe, be sure and check out her newsletter today, too. Now, just some really basic stuff before we get to the questions. I've been narrating audiobooks for nearly 5 years now, and over 4 of those have been with Jessie. And together, we've produced 85 audiobooks, and we're looking forward to the next 185. But let's take a peek at some of the questions that you guys submitted. Okay, the first one: how often does your throat get sore or your voice dry out? Does your voice ever get strained from all the book narrating you do? I've been really lucky. I have read plenty of stories of other narrators who do have like constant bouts with laryngitis and that kind of thing. And knock on wood, I've not had anything like that yet. Occasionally I've had, cold or allergies to kind of slow me down a little bit. But again, I've been pretty fortunate there too. For me, when I start recording, I have like an internal clock that starts, and I know I'm only going to be able to record so much that day. Not before my voice gives out. It's before my voice starts to degrade, I guess you could say, because when you're doing an audiobook, it's really important that I sound the same way when I start a day as when I finish, because if I don't sound the same way in chapter 1 that I do in, say, chapter 4, not only is that a problem, but then when I start chapter 5 the next day, I'm not going to sound the same. So it becomes a quality issue for me. So when I notice my voice starting to go, that's all I can do. But without question, though, the key to kind of preventing that or prolonging that is to stay hydrated. I mean, absolutely. Drinking water all the time is a must. I see, again, other narrators who talk about stopping to take a drink every page. I don't have to do quite that much, but I'd say every few pages, I'll stop and take a swig and go right on. But that's probably the biggest thing that I or anybody who has to speak for a living can do is hydrate, hydrate, hydrate. Okay, next question. Do you have any celebrity friends? Now, this may come as a shock to some of you, but I don't actually run with the celebrity crowd so much. I know. But I do have a friend that I'm quite proud of that I would say certainly is famous. Um, he's from my hometown and was a roommate of mine in college, Lee Black. He's a Dove-nominated gospel singer, and I want to make sure I've got this right. In 2022, he was nominated for a Dove Award, both as a solo artist and as a member of Legacy 5, the group he performs with, and as a songwriter. So this guy is just beyond talented. And for what it's worth, you can find his album Beloved on YouTube. It's on Spotify, and it is absolutely fantastic if you like inspirational type gospel music at all. Again, Lee Black, and the album is Beloved. Okay. Next question. What do you like most about giving the characters in a book a voice? How do you decide who sounds gruff and who sounds happy? I love that question. And because that is a lot of times how my thought process works. The easy answer is that Jessie actually usually decides that. Not that she ever tells me or influences me in any way, but in her writing of the story. Because anytime I'm going to record a book, the very first thing I have to do is read the book from start to finish. As I'm reading through, I start to develop a good sense of the personality of that person. And the voice, I just kind of naturally, as I progress through the book, start to hear their voice in my head. So, in that sense, it's the story itself that kind of picks who's going to be gruff and who's going to sound happy. Sometimes, I'll say this, Jessie will give kind of some clues, the way she writes Griff, he's got to have this sort of deep, gruff voice. He wouldn't do with a high-pitched voice. It just wouldn't work. But anyway, moving on. Have you ever eaten escargot? And if so, did you like it? Well, short answer is no. Never really had an opportunity to try snails that I know of. But I will say this. Growing up pretty close to the Alabama Gulf Coast, we ate oysters a pretty good bit. And I've, growing up, loved raw oysters. And, they're both mollusks, so I think I get partial credit there. And for what it's worth, although I'd never done it before, actually last night I cooked fried oysters for the first time ever. So, I'd had fried oysters, but last night was the first time I ever tried cooking them myself. And I didn't care for them when I was young. I cannot imagine why, because they're like the ocean's version of fried okra. And who doesn't like fried okra, right? Anyway, next question. Do you have a soundproof room, or must you read in a coat closet or something? Well, a few things. Actually, you're not wrong on any of it. Now, this is technically sound treated. Soundproof, even though that's a pretty common term, is actually like NASA level science stuff, because sound is a really, really tough thing to eliminate altogether. But you can treat it to manage things like echoes and outside interference and so forth. But to the second part of your question, while it was never a coat closet, this actually was, at one point, a linen closet. In fact, you can't see it, but right above me, there's still the little wire shelf, where you hang your hangers and whatnot on. So yes, humble beginnings, but it works out pretty well for me. All right, next, do you practice reading the book before you record it? Technically, no. I don't rehearse exactly, but as I said earlier, it's critically important, at least in my process, to read it start to finish. And as I'm going through, as I said, as the characters' voices start to develop, by the end, I'm pretty much hearing it, and sometimes I actually will read out loud in their voice. But in terms of actual rehearsal, no, I don't. Have you ever started laughing or even crying while narrating a book? Laughing, absolutely. I mean, if you've read or listened to Jessie's books, you know I had to have laughed during those, especially the Good Grief series, the romantic comedies. And it's pretty frequent that Jessie will have laugh out loud moments for me, no matter what the series is, romantic comedy or no. Crying while narrating a book? No, absolutely not. I am a man, and I don't cry, but I will say that on occasion, dust has flown into my eyes at the most inopportune times, causing me some difficulty there. Jessie's pretty good at that, too. Moving on. What's a recipe from Jessie's books that surprised you, good or bad? Now, unless you're real new to our channel, you know that I'll do cooking segments to reflect dishes that Jessie puts in her books. And I've done now a lot of different recipes. And I have to say, thankfully, that I've not been surprised in the negative yet. Knock on wood. I have been, I think, pleasantly surprised 2 times that I can think of. One was with the avolomonio soup. I hope I'm saying that right. It's the Greek rice, chicken, lemon soup. We talked about that in the other questions that I did in the newsletter, that's my absolute favorite soup. I had not made it ever before I made it for the preview for that book. And I think it was for Just a Cowboy's Convenient Marriage, I think. You can actually look at the preview playlist here on Say with Jay, and it should be in the title of the video. But I had no idea that soup was going to be that fantastic. Then also, I would say the Marry Me Chicken. I knew that was another one that I had not made before I made it for you guys. And I mean, it clearly looked good. Just from the recipe, you get an idea. So, I mean, if you're going to like something or not. So I wasn't worried about not liking it, but I think I was really surprised at how good it is. And again, both those recipes are available. You can look in the previews playlist and find them if you want to give them a try yourself. All right, I love this next question. Do you still have Gertrude's underwear? Also, what did your wife say about that? I don't have them, actually, either of those, her underwear or a wife. The first, because they were fictional, of course, obviously. But that still is, going back to the earlier question about laughing, remains one of the funniest scenes I think I've ever had to get through. But the answer, again, to both, no. All right, and the last question before we get on to the preview. How did you get the squirrels in your videos to eat from your hand? How long did it take? And combining another question, have you ever been bitten by one of your chipmunks? Okay, again, if you're really new, this probably bears a little bit of explaining. One of my hobbies is feeding the squirrels and chipmunks and birds in my backyard, and I had started, I guess it's been a few years now, sitting outside like on summer mornings and everything before I got started with work, and just watching everybody eat. Well, for whatever reason, the chipmunks actually are much, much braver than the squirrels, than the much larger squirrels. And they would just get a little closer and closer until finally one day, one of them actually came and took a peanut out of my hand. And it just kind of ballooned from there. And now I've gone through a couple of personnel changes, but I have, I'd say 3 or 4 who will eat from my hand pretty regularly. Out of, I'd say on a typical day, I might have 7 chipmunks and any number of squirrels. And for the record, I have yet to actually have a squirrel eat from my hand. So they're big chickens, pretty much, compared to the chipmunks. Now, have I ever been bitten by one? I have been nibbled on. Apparently, my fingers look a lot like peanuts, which I don't think that's very flattering, but usually they're just little nibbles, never anything to break the skin, anything like that. The most exciting encounter I've ever had is, while they're not afraid of me, they do tend to be very, very twitchy around each other. And if you've ever seen chipmunks tangle up close, it's like a Bruce Lee karate movie. I mean, just flying around everywhere. But one morning, I was feeding one of my regulars. Speedy is what I call her. And I can tell them apart, usually by little physical features like Speedy has a stubby tail. She lost part of her tail at some point in her life. But another chipmunk came up behind her, and she didn't see him. And I guess he may have, I don't know, sniffed her tail or whatever, but she suddenly just leaped up and actually landed in my lap. I was sitting like cross-legged, and so if you don't drink coffee, but you still need to wake up in the morning, I highly, highly recommend a chipmunk in the lap. Works wonders. Anyway, let's take a look at this week's new release, episode 2 of For Keeps With You. Now, I will say, for anybody who hasn't listened to episode 1 or who doesn't want any kind of spoilers at all, there will be a few from this point on, so fair warning. All right. For Keeps With You is the story of Dusty Gibson. She is a professional motocross racer, and at the start of this story, she suffers a rather horrific accident and breaks multiple bones, including her leg and her back. And she is, in the course of her treatment, sent to physical therapy. That's where she meets Roland Bryant. He's the physical therapist who gets all the tough cases. And he's dealing with overcoming a tragic accident of his own. And that's where episode 2 starts out. At the end of episode 1, after a session, Dusty has expressed some frustration at the progress and so forth, and just, tells Roland he doesn't understand. And that's where Roland gets to give what he calls his speech. And that's the sample we've got for you here today. So here are the first few minutes from episode 2 of For Keeps With You. I hope you enjoy it, and then you'll come back this Friday for the full release of episode 2 here on Say With Jay. Roland stared at Dusty. This was his opening. He could tell her about the long process and encourage her to stick with it. He'd never hesitated before. Why was he hesitating now? He shoved whatever feeling it was aside and straightened off the desk. That's where you're wrong. He moved around the side of the desk. Do you have a weak stomach? Her brows drew down into a V. Huh? He reached down for the bottom of his pant leg. I showed this to one woman, and she threw up on me. He turned his head and looked up at her with one eye. I'm not making that up. Showed her what? Dusty asked, her brows still drawn. He pulled his pant leg up. The pink and white deformed skin slowly came into view. He set his foot on the desk. This. He lifted a shoulder. This is actually my good leg. You're kidding, Dusty gasped, throwing a hand over her mouth. I'm sorry, she said between her fingers. It's fine. You should hear the kids' reactions. Her eyes snapped to his. You tell them? If I think they need to hear it. Her hand dropped back to her lap. So I need to hear it. You said I didn't understand. He nodded at his leg. Even now, he could hardly believe that it belonged to him. It didn't look like his. I think I do. Her fingers twisted in her ponytail, and she bit her lip as her eyes slid slowly back to his leg. She swallowed. I guess you must. Yeah. He dropped his leg down. You want to see the other one? Her eyes flew to his. It was the first time since they'd met that she seemed uncertain. She didn't wear the emotion well. Never mind. He put his other leg up and drew up his pant leg. The skin on this leg was even more deformed. It actually turned his stomach. Can't they do surgery, like plastic surgery, to fix that? She asked. He hated the hesitation in her voice. They could. They wanted to, actually. But I'd already spent months in the hospital. Skin grafts, bandage changes, infections, constant pain. I was ready to walk out and never walk into another hospital again. I bet. Now compassion filled her eyes, and he didn't like that any better. He shoved his pant leg down and dropped his foot. How old were you? She asked. I was a second-year medical student. Normally, he stopped the questions right here, but she was faster than his normal patience. You were going to be a doctor. Yeah. He shifted, leaning again on the desk, his arms crossed over his chest. A hospital's a bad place for a doctor to hate. He shrugged like it didn't matter. By the time I was done with therapy, I had found a new calling. He met her eyes, keeping any emotional pain wiped clean from his face. People seem to think I'm good at it. I see why. She nodded, her posture straightened and her chin lifted. It worked. Anything boys can do, girls can do better. She grinned with a challenge. You did it. I can do it better. He laughed. I never understood the competition between the sexes, but if that's what motivates you, lap it up. You don't compete with your girlfriend? His face fell. Technically, he supposed, he'd won because she'd died. But no, he'd never considered it a competition, even if she was a med student too. One from a family of means who'd thought it a good idea to let their beautiful, gregarious daughter get her pilot's license. Stupid parents. No, he gave her honesty. I always thought of us as a team with different strengths that complemented each other. He closed his mouth. If he started to think about Janice, the pain he kept locked away might escape. Past tense? She asked softly. She died. He stood abruptly. I bet your friend is waiting on you. Which one is it today? Harris or Kelly, Tuff's wife? Dusty took the hint, thankfully, and struggled out of the chair. Riley is picking me up. she'll be new. You have a lot of friends. He walked to the door and put his hand on the knob. Dusty nodded. I guess you could have given me a lecture on counting my blessings. Would that have been effective? Because I do have that one in my repertoire. Maybe. I guess you could try it out on me next week. Okay, I'll keep that in mind. If your doctor's appointment doesn't go well on Monday, I'll brush it off and whip it out. She laughed. Oh, it's going to go well. If he knows what's good for him, he's going to tell me I can drive and I can lose at least one of these braces. Good luck with that. He bet the doctor actually would allow her to take her brace off and drive. Maybe not with a regular patient, but Dusty was anything but regular. Hi, this is Jay, and thanks for listening. If you're ready for another great audiobook, here's one we think you might like. Or check out the playlist with all our latest releases. Don't forget to subscribe to Say with Jay, give this video a thumbs up, and tell us what you liked in the comments.